The president planning another summit with his coalition ally, Prime Minister Tony Blair of Great Britain. The White House says one of the topics will be the future of Iraq, plus the future of Northern Ireland and the future of Middle East peace. So does that mean this war is almost over? Fox coverage continues now. The White House correspondent Wendell Goler live on a darkened North Lawn. Hello, Wendell.
Hello, Shepard. The President and Prime Minister will meet early next week in Northern Ireland to talk about the future of post-war Iraq. But White House officials say despite the focus of their summit, despite the fact that there are troops in Baghdad now, that does not mean that the two leaders think the war is almost over. Still, reporters are a hard-headed bunch, and the White House is getting some chuckles out of the fact that some of the people they're having the hardest time convincing are the same folks who were asking just a few days ago why coalition troops seem to be bogged down. Press Secretary Ari Fleischer says there are actually a number of items on next week's agenda.
Lost one of the most compelling voices in American journalism today. Here's CNN's Bruce Morton.
Michael Kelly was 46, editor-at-large for The Atlantic Monthly and a syndicated columnist for The Washington Post. He's the first American reporter and the first embedded journalist to die in the war.
I know that many people in this building and
programs intended to keep people out of trouble.
Bush met today with about a dozen or so Iraqi exiles. None of them, however, received an invitation to be part of an interim Iraqi government. Mr. Bush invited them here more to showcase the horror of living under Saddam Hussein's regime, but their presence illustrated a split within the Bush administration on post-Saddam Iraq. Defense Secretary Rumsfeld wants to set up an interim government now with exiled Iraqis in the lead. Secretary of State Powell, who made several trips to the White House today, says the interim government has to include Iraqis from within the country, people who stuck it out during the decades of Saddam's brutal rule. And officials say Powell has the backing of the president on that.
We want an interim authority that is a representative of all the groups who have an interest in the future of Iraq. And as I've said on many occasions, we wanted to include those who are in the external opposition who have worked so long and so hard and with such determination for the liberation of Iraq, but also individuals inside.
It's also a split between the U.S. and Europe on the UN's role in administering post-war Iraq. The French, the Germans, and the Russians want it to be a controlling role. U.S. officials say there is no chance of that, given the price that the U.S. is paying in lives in a war that much of Europe opposed. There is a minor difference between the U.S. and Britain on that. The U.S. wants the UN's role to be limited to humanitarian aid distribution, running Iraq's oil for food program. Prime Minister Blair wants a somewhat more robust role, but somewhat short of complete control. That's where the talks between him and the president will focus next week. Shepard?
All right, Wendell. Thanks very much. Wendell Goler live at the White House. You're looking live inside Baghdad, where we know of 3 explosions in the center city this Saturday morning in the capital and numerous explosions in the suburbs. Let's talk for a minute about how it is that already our forces are inside the capital city, both Marines and Army, inside Baghdad tonight. First on Fox and confirmed by our correspondents. Here's the story. Think of the drones that fly over this city and all the help that they get from those. Special operations forces believed to number 10,000 in Iraq for a period of weeks, if not months. No one will be specific, but special ops numbering 10,000, the largest number of special operations forces ever used in the history of warfare by the United States, being used to set up and continue this conflict. So the drones are overhead. The special forces and special operations guys are on the ground, and aerial reconnaissance assets, many of which we probably do not even know the details. The truth of the matter is they can watch people in their cars or walking down the streets. They can spot these elite Republican Guard units and the rest. They know what's vulnerable and what's not because of the surveillance techniques that are available to them. And as a result, special missions are clearly being carried out tonight. The details of those special missions are confidential, but it's perfectly clear that they've decided to take targets of opportunity. Sound like a familiar phrase? The first night of all of this, shortly after 9 o'clock here on the East Coast, the first target of opportunity was the senior leadership of the Iraqi government, believed to be Saddam Hussein and his own 2 sons and 2 others. They were struck in a bunker, 40 missiles raining down and all the rest. Questions about whether, in fact, he might have been killed that very night. And then today, the videotape of Saddam Hussein walking around in Baghdad with a small but very loud crowd cheering him on, watching as he raised his arms in the air, as he smiled with smoke billowing in the distance. And for the first time since we began to see these tapes, since the beginning of this coalition, or since the beginning of this coalition activity, some folks in Washington began to say, maybe he is still alive and maybe he's fine. Of course, there are many questions about this videotape. When was it shot? But you see what's believed to be smoke in the back. I've read your emails by the hundreds and hundreds saying, those are dark clouds, those are this, those are that. Look at the color of his mustache. Look at how broad his shoulders are. Look at the clothes that the people are wearing. Some are wearing leather. They're all in long sleeves, if you'd notice that, on a day when we know the temperature reached 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees, and there they are, pretty well covered up. But the fact of the matter is, many people in Washington are saying, for the first time, to our own senior White House correspondent Jim Engel, this may in fact be proof that he is alive. There was another statement that was made by Saddam Hussein, a slightly different looking Saddam Hussein, on Iraqi television today, where he talked about this downing of a helicopter, an Apache helicopter, and spoke of this farmer who has been given credit by the Iraqis for taking down this Apache, which of course has happened since the beginning of the war, which of course is leading some to believe, well, maybe in fact this is new. Well, if you read Newsweek magazine this week, you know that, at least according to the reporting of Newsweek, Saddam Hussein got many of his tactics for fighting from the movie Black Hawk Down. Sounds a little far out, but it's what Newsweek is reporting this week, and it makes sense to many observers of this military and this man's operations. How to take down a helicopter with small arms fire. Like anything else, the vulnerabilities are there, and they're pretty well laid out. Not to say that Hollywood gave away any secrets. You can find them online. But interesting enough to find that Saddam Hussein and his regime may have, according to the reporting of Newsweek magazine, learned how to carry out some of their operations from watching a Hollywood movie. So is he alive or isn't he alive, and does it really matter? The truth of the matter is, though the Pentagon would like to say that's an irrelevant matter, because down the road everyone is going to realize we're going to take over, says the Pentagon. The coalition will own this city for a period of time. An interim government will be put into place as soon as within the next week, according to our national security correspondent's reporting, Brett Baer and sources speaking to him, as soon as within the next week that they'll put in an interim government, and whether he's alive or dead will really make no difference. But in the meantime, there is certainly widespread belief that these pictures, which were shown on Arab television and across the Arab world today, could in fact make a difference, could in fact inspire some people there who have evil intentions to come on and do whatever it is they had planned. You probably know that they discussed some unconventional attack, and that was on the airport. An attack on what is now Baghdad International using unconventional means. That was the statement read today. And you remember these pictures from last night as an injured Iraqi soldier was checked, as Saddam Hussein stood in the black background on the blue billboard, which leads into what was Saddam International Airport. It was taken over with pretty good ease, and now the questions were, will they really use unconventional means to attack coalition forces at the Baghdad airport and leave them, as the spokesperson in Iraq said, sitting in their own graveyard at that airport. Right now, we've been able to hook back up with our own Greg Kelly, who is on the road. This is his tape, it's my understanding. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. This is tape shot by Greg Kelly on the road to Baghdad. I heard the phrase today, warts and all, for describing this war and the importance of showing it all. Embedded reporters are not there to bring you only the good news. There is a downside to military activity, and it is clear right there for certainly hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of enemy forces, and certainly some civilians, though every effort has been made to eliminate or diminish to whatever degree possible the number of civilian deaths. There are many bodies alongside the road, and our own correspondents have described that in great detail. It's part of the horrors of war, and certainly tonight we're expecting to be getting more and more of those pictures. Let's go live to the USS Constellation now, and jets are taking off.
Do we have the pictures of the Constellation? Okay. We've all this talk about tanks rolling into Baghdad and the rest. We ought not lose sight of the fact that there is still an air operation going on. These are live pictures off a video phone coming in from the USS Constellation. We were watching them come in over the last few minutes or so. There is just a constant, almost constant, not literally constant, comings and goings of these flights. Now their mission is somewhat different than it was, of course, in the early stages, but it still matters. There's still work to be done. There's work to be done in the north, and there is still risk to be had. Anytime a jet takes off one of these aircraft carriers, there is risk in the air, and there is risk in the mission, and we learned that over the last couple of days. An F-18 was lost just 2 nights ago, as I recall. One pilot lost in that. So as we have over the last couple of days, focused so much on the ground operation as it's closed into Baghdad, we ought not lose sight of the fact that there are sailors and Navy pilots on board these aircraft carriers who are also continuing to make their contribution to the American effort in Iraq. It's almost impossible to describe what it is like, if you haven't done it, and I've done it once, to either take off or land on an aircraft carrier. But when those things come back, it looks like a mattress in the middle of the ocean for that jet to put down on, and now it appears ready to take off from. General Clark?
It's still remarkable technology, and really there's no other nation that has that technology and the skill and the teamwork to put that kind of an operation together, Aaron.
You have small cities, a city not, honestly, not a whole lot larger or smaller rather than the one I grew up in, 6,000 people or so on those aircraft carriers. It's a complicated piece of business. Baghdad on a Saturday morning, we see the gray and the haze in the sky, and we see people moving around there, and what must all of them be thinking about the day ahead. Surely now they know that at least the very beginning of the American effort inside the city itself is underway. How widely that is known in the city, we don't know, but we do know it is known by us. CNN's Walt Rogers joins us again. Walt, we want neither to overstate this nor understate its significance that elements of the 3rd Infantry have moved in. Is that right?
That is indeed true, Aaron, and it must have been quite a shock for the Baghdad residents when they woke up this Saturday morning to see American tanks rolling through their city. Here's what we know. Elements of the 2nd Brigade of the 3rd Infantry Division have moved into the south central part of Baghdad itself. This is no longer the outskirts. U.S. tanks from the 3rd Infantry Division are rolling in Baghdad at this time. Army sources have confirmed this to CNN. They've told us we can report it. They've also said we should describe this as essentially a reconnaissance foray. Still, we know their objective. We cannot report the objective at this time, but it does appear very clearly from the maps we've seen that what the Army is striving to do at this point is carve out chunks of the city, bite off a chunk of Baghdad, and then take that chunk and literally dismember the city zone by zone so that each of these zones falls under the control of the U.S. Army. Again, this is a very significant step forward because, as I say, when the Iraqis of Baghdad woke up this morning, in some neighborhoods in the center of the city, they woke up to U.S. main battle tanks rolling through. Aaron?
Well, thank you, General Clark. Very quickly, how do the Iraqis defend that, General?
They've got to mass forces against the tanks. They've got to get RPG guys. They've got to throw they got to throw Molotov cocktails, gasoline bottles on them. They got to do something because this is a kind of thrust that if it goes in and carves up hunks of the city, it's over.
And just really quickly, once established, is there any way to stop it? Once they're sort of positioned there, is there any way to stop it?
Yes, because one of the major risks, as you were talking to Michael Gordon before, one of the major risks is we simply don't have the numbers of troops that the Iraqis presumably could field, counting the Special Republican Guards, remnants of other divisions, Fedayeen, civilians given rifles, and so forth. So there's always a chance that somehow they could penetrate behind our positions and roll us up. So we have to be very alert when we're in here.
General, thank you. We'll keep an eye on that as that's going on. Its significance. There may be a point where we can report all of the detail that Mike has, or that rather that Walter has. There is one element of this we haven't touched on in a while, and that's the question of humanitarian aid and refugees and the like. We'll talk with Ken Bacon in a moment. We take a break first.
When troops were south of Nasiriyah, a probing that was happening when troops were outside of Karbala to the south and to the west, and the same with Al-Qut. And in each one of these probes, they met with a great deal of resistance. And in some cases, they took a lot of fire. In fact, in the early going, I remember a lot of choppers being shot up. Not that it took them out, but a number of them taking a lot of fire. Is it safe to assume tonight, or to presume, that these probes which are happening because they can see that there will be little or no resistance?
Well, maybe not because they can see that there will be little or no resistance, but that they know numerically they have the advantage, equipment-wise they have the advantage, and they've probably also gained a fair amount of intelligence on the ground about what will happen if, in fact, they achieve this particular objective. I would say all of those things are rather safe to assume, but you can't learn anything about your enemy, Shepard, until you engage it. And we were told in the Fox booth last week by a very senior person in this building, someone who's very much involved in the military planning, hey, look, people sometimes quiver or quake because there's a fight. Listen, let me explain this to you. We want to fight, because when we fight them, we learn about what we're made of. More importantly, for the long run, we learn what they're made of. And throughout every one of these encounters, coalition forces, yes, there's been fierce resistance. There have been casualties. There have been deaths, absolutely. But they've also learned that in the end, coalition forces have the tactics and the equipment and the numbers to prevail. And perhaps that's what we're seeing playing out, at least in a limited sense, on the streets of Baghdad.
Major Garrett live at the Pentagon, and we'll talk more about what we can see and what we can't. And when we come back from a commercial break, an astounding aerial view that's available to every television station that's willing to pay for it in all of America. Available to you if you want it. And it will give you just a very small idea of exactly how well our military can see what they're doing on the ground. First on Fox, the American military is inside Saddam Hussein's Baghdad.
One problem is that 3 of Iraq's neighbors have said they won't accept any refugees. That is Turkey, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. The 3 other countries, Jordan, Iran, and Syria, said that they will accept refugees. So far, the refugee flow has been very, very slow. But as I say, it could be picking up, and I would expect to see big groups moving toward Iran.
And that leads to what? We already see in the South already, we've got a humanitarian crisis of some proportion because there's a lack of something as simple and essential as drinking water.
Yeah. Displacement is a problem because it can lead to starvation, it can lead to exposure, it can lead to exhaustion and to disease. So it's very important to try to get food and water and care to these people as soon as possible. The UN is well positioned to do that. It's lined up food, tents, etc. But most of this is outside Iraq. The problem is going to be if these people can't get out of Iraq, if they're caught in Iraq, it will be difficult to get aid to them as long as the fighting's going on.
These are what we call NGOs, non-governmental organizations. How prepared are the NGOs to actually get the food, get the water, get the doctors, get the medicine, if in fact they can get to the refugees?
They're more and more prepared. They got a late start because they didn't get U.S. government funding until this week, actually. But the UN has filled a lot of that gap by, as I say, pre-positioning tents, food, and...
When it really Information, of course, is developed from the people there about what they may know about unfriendly forces that might be nearby. And essentially, they're going to be trying to string together some of these neighborhoods, some of these sectors, and essentially build up the city, at least build up control of the city that way. A number of officials have suggested, however, that there are, of course, special ops that are working on the other side in areas behind the lines, so to speak. The aircraft are flying at their whim, so every indication that they are getting intelligence information both ways. Lester?
David, thanks very much for the update. There are thousands of men and women serving in the U.S. Armed Forces, many taking part in Operation Iraqi Freedom right now. NBC's Ann Curry is in Kuwait and caught up with two Chinook pilots whose friendship has stood the test of time.
Major Moore, Major Anthony, I understand you guys are experiencing something of a reunion.
Yes, we are.
What's that story?
We attended flight school together, you know, back in 1990.
1990.
Roger that. And haven't seen each other for quite some time.
You were friends back then?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, we went to OBC first.
It said Baghdad or Baghdad in that direction. So these pictures, just what Greg rolled on, they don't have facilities to edit videotape along the way, so they feed it into us in bulk, and then we edit it down for you. Instead of that, you're seeing the whole raw thing. And this is a bit of that drive along. You may notice that the video quality is quite good here. That's because he's feeding from a satellite uplink that he carries along with him instead of with his normal video phone through which we normally see him. So these pictures are good and tell a lot of stories about the carnage along the roadway into Baghdad. As you know, a lot of their equipment has been taken out. Greg Kelly's been telling stories of the smoking machinery on the side of the road and the bodies of those Iraqis who chose not to surrender, and all that he has seen on the road in. As you can see, you see the barbed wire in the foreground there. It's my belief that this is still part of that trip into Baghdad, and it would appear in this videotape from the last day or so, that other one, it would appear at least, was if not a prisoner of war, at least someone who had surrendered. This would appear to be much the same, and the barbed wire set up as maybe a sort of makeshift POW camp set up alongside the road, and Greg will be with us to tell us much more about this in the hour ahead. I'm glad you're home late on a Friday night, at least here on the East Coast, because we have a lot of great pictures to bring you tonight. The latest stuff that's come in from our embedded correspondents, and I'm still blown away by the fact that they are inside Baghdad tonight. Yes, we knew there'd be probing missions, but yes, we knew they were going to have to look from the air to make sure they were ready to do it. And I want to show you real quickly, we'll get back to this, but I want to show you one of our Fox flyovers and give you sort of an idea of what it is that the military is able to see. You've seen our Fox flyovers throughout. This one happens to be of the Baghdad airport. These pictures come to us from Digiglobe, or Digital Globe, which has geosynchronous satellites up there, global positioning satellites with cameras. They use these cameras to make a map of the entire country and truly any place on the planet. And if this were programmed to do so at this particular moment, we could zoom this into a home or a street or a car. And it's my understanding that the federal government can zoom in to the point where they can read a license plate off the back of a vehicle from a satellite way up in space. We no longer have access to real-time satellite imagery. Only the federal government has that access. Only they can zoom in real time using the satellites, the drones, the other surveillance aircraft, and special forces and special ops on the ground. They have lots of eyes and ears inside that country, so much so that they know that on this particular Saturday morning in Baghdad, it was safe to go into Saddam City. And we'll take you there after a quick commercial break.
Crisis with Iraq. Our team Washington has updates.
And block by block watching and control of the population, that they'd have a hard time getting out, that automobile travel would be restricted and other things, and apparently that's not the case.
Let me just see if this makes sense. I'm just working through this. For the Americans, it strikes me there's a two-edged sword here, because on the one hand, what the Americans don't want is a lot of people in the streets. They want literally, they want the streets clear. They don't want a refugee problem. They don't want people flowing out of the city. They just want people to stay where they are, right?
Well, yes and no. If there's fighting and there's firing coming from a building, it would be wonderful if for the Americans if they knew that there were nobody in the building, no civilians at all, just fighters. And then you could treat it as a military target. So in one respect, we don't want a refugee problem, and we certainly don't want them interfering with the maneuver of our forces and the entry of our forces into the Baghdad region. But on the other hand, in terms of each tactical engagement, if there's something we could do to get the civilian population out of that area so we could concentrate on the fighters, that would be helpful to us.
In an individual operation.
Exactly.
General Clark, thank you. Scott Nelson of the Boston Globe is on the phone. Scott, we've talked to a couple of times before along the way, and we'll talk with him now. Scott, tell us where you are as best you're allowed and what you can report.
We're just outside the city of Baghdad right now to the southeast. It's been a long haul the last couple of days for the Marines, essentially fighting their way up city by city along the Tigris River coming up. But they're largely there now. I think there's still some pockets of fighting. There's still some pockets of Republican Guard holding out. And there was some relatively intense shelling overnight from artillery positions. But it feels here like it's largely over. The Marines have largely fought the fight that they came here to do, and they're now at the edge of the capital city.
Are they aware, are you aware that some number of tanks of the 3rd Infantry Division have now entered the city of Baghdad?
They're not aware, but I'll tell you what, when I hang up here and tell them, I'm sure they'll be glad to hear it. A lot of the fighting here yesterday, as we came up through the towns to the southeast of Baghdad, was in fact Marine M1 tanks against Republican Guard tanks. And I saw a lot of blown up Iraqi tanks along the way. And this morning I actually passed my first Marine tank that had been hit by a TOW missile and blown up. So there have been a lot of tank fighting here, but the Marines will be very glad to hear that the 3rd ID tanks are actually in Baghdad at this point.
We've talked in each of our conversations about the changing mood of the troops that you're traveling with. They've now had the last several days have been very intense for them, not at all easy. They have emerged from that successfully. How has the mood changed over the last several days?
I think that there's almost a little bit of pent-up emotion here, that it feels like we're almost done, but we can't quite let up. I think that's what the Marines are, the Marines seem to be feeling, because there are still pockets of Republican Guard out here, and there are still people who are willing to fight and die against the Marines, and they know that, so they can't completely let down their guard at this point. It's not as if the fight is over, but it's largely over. I think the large pitched battles are probably done, and most of the towns have been swept at this point, and I think that there's just a little bit of expectation here. Look, we're almost done. We're almost to the place we set out to find. We just have to finish the job and not take any silly casualties at the end here. Now let's all get home, I think, is sort of what they're thinking.
Let's all get home indeed. Scott, thanks again. Scott Nelson, who reports for the Boston Globe and has been reporting for us as well. We've assembled a group of people from around the country again tonight to talk a bit about where the country is at this moment. They'll join us after a break.
Unlike Wall Street, your life doesn't stop every day at 4. Your hopes and dreams go beyond stocks and
Our military service as well. Right now, the firing is pretty much on hold for now. This is the longest I think we've gone without hearing a shot fired in about an hour and a half now. Just see if I can get a better vantage point. As we go forward, it looks like it's a rainy day in Baghdad. Of course, it's not. It's just so covered with thick black smoke and a lot of destroyed vehicles. Now, we've lost one tank so far. It's actually just disabled. One American M1 tank. There took an RPG round, several RPG rounds burning.
I know it does.
Jeff?
We're listening live to Greg Kelly. The videotape at which you're looking is part of Greg Kelly's trip into Baghdad. The audio you're hearing is our correspondent Greg Kelly in the middle of a fierce firefight, describing taking a fire from paramilitary groups on the backs of trucks and one tank now disabled. Greg, how far into Baghdad have you gotten? How long has this firefight been going on? Apparently, we've lost Greg Kelly's audio yet again. I am told not to worry about that because the audio dropouts happen and happen often. The equipment, though advanced, is certainly is certainly difficult to keep up and operating when you're on the move like this, especially in a hostile fire situation. We're keeping monitor on Greg as we can while watching this astounding tape. I want to let you know that the moment we're able to hook up with Greg Kelly live again in the middle of this firefight inside Saddam Hussein's Baghdad, we will do that. In the meantime, would you look at this? The third ID on the road to Baghdad, which would have been yesterday their time. It's 9 a.m. now in Baghdad. This would have been yesterday. My assumption is that you can tell that it's either in the morning or in the afternoon because the shadows are long from the trees. So it's not midday at least, and they encountered some degree of resistance there. Greg gave us some degree of blow-by-blow on this, saying that what he saw on the side of the road was a great deal of carnage, a lot of Iraqi military vehicles that had been taken out, and a lot of gunfire, as you can tell. Let's listen. Unedited videotape as fed from Greg Kelly a short time ago. Greg described seeing Iraqi equipment burning on the side of the road for miles and miles and miles, and said the reason that this was able to happen is that our reach is so much longer than theirs. He used a boxing analogy at one point, saying we can hit them in many cases before they can even see us. There you go, the entrance to the city and the Saddam Hussein billboard, which it's my understanding has now been leveled. I'm not 100% that that's the one, but it certainly looks like the same one. Is Greg narrating there? Let's listen. It's now midnight on the East Coast, 9 p.m. on the West Coast, 9 a.m. in Baghdad on a Saturday morning, and we'll be showing it to you live as our troops are there inside the city for the very first time and first on Fox tonight, pushing through enemy fire. No fanfare, no announcement, but they're in there, and so is our correspondent Greg Kelly. The first, along with Oliver North, to report the coalition is inside the city limits. These are brand new exclusive pictures of the troops approaching the city, shot as the tanks and troops rumble into Baghdad. All of this on Team Fox coverage of Operation Iraqi Freedom. And we're going now to Greg Kelly, who is once again in the middle of a firefight inside Baghdad and exclusively on Fox. Greg, what do you see?
Shepard, on either side of our column, we're seeing just scores of recently destroyed Iraqi military vehicles, also civilian vehicles that were coming at the convoy in a hostile fashion. Believe me, you see a white truck barreling right at you. There's no doubt here with the 2nd Brigade what the intent is. They've been destroying these vehicles as they come out the convoy. Now, some vehicles have been approaching us and they appear just lost, like they woke up this morning and were surprised to find the American military at their doorstep. When that happens, the 2nd Brigade waves them off, pushes their head, starts warning these 3 vehicles come upon our convoy, and then they turned around after warning shots were fired and hand signals were offered to get out because this is a dangerous place. Again, though, mostly destroyed military vehicles on either side of the road. They're still burning. We're seeing a lot of Iraqi militia, Republican Guard. We also hear that in the front of the column, an Iraqi Republican Guard general surrendered or was captured. We can't confirm which one, but he is now in our custody. Again, the firing right now has subsided somewhat. We have close air support giving us some help from the air. We got A-10 Warthogs from the Air Force line. There are artillery positions not too far to our west. And as we continue into Baghdad, it is very, very dark. There's so much smoke in our vicinity. It looks like it's an overcast day, but it's actually clear according to the weatherman. Sporadic fire now ahead of us, to the left, to the right. As we move out, we are in an armored vehicle. Apologize, but we thought the trip was safer in an armored personnel carrier. That's where we are right now. Colonel Perkins, 2nd Brigade Commander, is directing this portion of the fight. Again, things have cooled down somewhat, even though they're still firing about 4 or 5 vehicles ahead of me. Rear, we have 1 tank disabled, taken out by food. Out fine. Because we are going still into Baghdad.
Greg, is this a mission that you're allowed to discuss to any degree, even just the basics? If so, do. Otherwise, obviously, don't. And secondly, Associated Press is reporting, or Reuters news service is reporting, that it's 6 to 8 tanks that are inside the city limits. Can you confirm that, or say if it's more or less?
Sorry, I just can't hear you. I knew you were talking, but I can't hear a word you're saying. There's still a lot of gunfire around here. We have now dumped this area.
The cause of the crash is unknown, but Central Command says preliminary evidence suggests the chopper was not brought down by hostile fire. Iraqi TV says 2 women carried out a suicide attack, killed 3 U.S. soldiers at a military.
But sometimes apparently they are surviving in those bunkers. When they see them moving, when they see them trying to get out, these guys are engaging fire heavily. Whoa. What is that? That's the bunker. All right. Stand by. Stand by.
For those of you just tuning in, we're listening live as Greg Kelly is in the middle of a firefight inside Baghdad. He's reporting over the satellite phone at the moment because he is traveling with the military instead of his own Fox Humvee to be safer in the middle of this firefight. The pictures you're watching are just fed in tape from Greg, which were of his trip into Baghdad. We don't have communications with Greg, but we want to continue to listen to his microphone. We apologize for the quality of the audio, but you get it. and now he is gone. Not to say that anything bad has happened, certainly, but the technology is such that it is sometimes quite difficult to get through. If you are just joining us, Fox News can now confirm that the Army and the Marines have forces inside the city of Baghdad and have for the better part of at least the last 2 hours. Probing maneuvers, as they have been described. Not officially, but what we were told we...
Knocking on the door of Baghdad. But the final push into the city could yet prove to be the toughest fighting of all. The patchy, somewhat disorganized defense of the airport last night has left coalition commanders with several questions. Have they done so much damage now to Iraqi command and control centers that they can no longer put up a proper fight? Or are the best troops simply withdrawing into the city to fight there, street by street? The answer to that could well decide how quickly they make a final push into the city. James Mates, ITV News, with the U.S. Marines south of Baghdad.
Now about the man the airport used to be named for. In the year 221 BC, the founding emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang, died suddenly. His ministers, who literally had no idea what to do when a king perished, feared that news of Qin's death would doom the empire. So they kept him in his state carriage and continued to drive him around the capital, even when the natural forces of decay began to make themselves known. His prime minister simply announced the emperor had asked to have a second carriage follow him around, full of rotting fish. Besides that ancient version of Weekend at Bernie's, we also know of verified doubles in history. There was a stand-in for the British General Field Marshal Montgomery during the Second World War. There were extra Mao Zedongs. So, Saddam Hussein on Iraqi TV today. Saddam Hussein in the streets of Baghdad today. NBC's Andrea Mitchell on the interpretations of the State Department, and maybe they should be looking to see if he's being followed around by a carriage full of rotting fish.
Intelligence officials say it appears to be Saddam Hussein, defiant even as coalition forces encircle Baghdad, looking more like a politician at a campaign stop than a besieged dictator. If it is Saddam, it would be his first public appearance in years. But when was the tape made? And does this prove Saddam survived that devastating attack on his bunker the night the war began? One clue, Saddam's closest aide, Abid Mahmoud, was at his side, and in the distance, smoke from what could be oil fires.
It would be difficult, I think, to stage that sort of tape, the walk-around specifically, because of the smoke in the air and the damage.
Today, Iraqi television also showed a man appearing to be Saddam, exhorting his people to, quote, strike the enemy with force. He mentions a recent event, Iraq's claim that a farmer shot down an Apache helicopter. Saddam did go out among his people on the third day of the first Gulf War. But after barely escaping a direct hit on his motorcade 3 weeks later, experts say he has been obsessed with his security, appearing only in pre-taped speeches, moving underground from bunker to bunker. So why would he reappear now with U.S. Special Operations teams on the ground in Baghdad and spies possibly in his midst? Especially since, with the power out in much of Baghdad, few Iraqis could see him.
The only plausible political value is influencing his elite forces to keep fighting.
Experts say the real purpose may be to rally the rest of the Arab world against America. The administration tried to downplay Saddam's importance.
And whether he is there at the end or not, or found or not, is almost irrelevant. We are almost totally in control of the country.
But the fact is, if Saddam is alive, the rest of his regime will certainly be less likely to surrender. Andrea Mitchell, NBC News at the State Department.
Whoever is running that country is not very good. Not as a military leader, anyway. That is the recurrent theme of the war in Iraq. Time and time again, strategical disasters, snipers who can't shoot straight, and as NBC's David Bloom and the men of the Third ID found out, Republican guards who do not know the military legend that is the bridge too far.
Once again tonight, we're with the 315 Infantry, this combat battalion from the U.S. Army's 3rd Infantry Division. The job of this force, and there are other elements of the 3rd ID that are now closer into Baghdad, but the job of the force we're with is to guard a bridge, a critical crossing over the Euphrates River.
So critical that the Iraqis keep trying to take back the bridge, with disastrous results. The charred remains of Iraqi tanks litter the main roadway. Destroyed Iraqi armored personnel carriers smolder in tall grass near the riverbanks. Pickup trucks filled with Iraqi soldiers carried them only to their graves. In 2 firefights today, less than 15 miles from the outskirts of Baghdad, Captain Josh Wright's Gator Company destroyed close to a dozen Iraqi tanks. But he says, surprisingly, those technicals may be Iraq's most effective weapon.
The technique is for them to load up personnel in the back with light anti-tank weapons. And then
like rocket-propelled grenades?
Right, like RPGs. They bring them in close, dump them off, and these guys scatter into the brush. And then it's a game of finding them.
Today in that thick brush, Americans found instead this large stockpile of weapons.
Load around, point and shoot. It's bad for us.
Including RPGs and their unwrapped grenades.
M59 mass.
And significantly, gas masks and atropine from Turkey.
We found these vials, still trying to find out exactly what they are.
Evidence the Americans say the Iraqis may still be planning a chemical weapons strike. But touring the battlefield, an American commander is upbeat.
I see pockets of resistance out there, but that's okay. We can deal with that.
As early as tomorrow, Colonel Twitty's tanks and Bradleys may begin the final push north, joining forces with the 101st Airborne Division for a planned combined assault on the Iraqi capital. David Bloom, NBC News, southwest of Baghdad.
When countdown returns, so we've got the airport in Baghdad. What next? As the final battle in the city looms, what could play out on the streets?
Correspondent echoing what Greg Kelly just told us live from inside Baghdad, that it's as though it is still night there, the smoke very thick, the Iraqis possibly, according to the Reuters correspondent, lighting more oil trenches, and we have reason to believe that in fact that has happened. And you can see from this camera it's not awfully bad from this particular location, but over and to the right and to the distance, certainly very smoky, and very smoky in the area through which Greg Kelly is traveling right now. It's our belief that he's in the middle of a firefight. I've gotten a lot of email from you asking if Greg Kelly said that one of our tanks had been taken out along the way, and we've gone back to make sure and to check the tape. And exactly what he said is that one of those tanks had become disabled on its own, not that it had been taken out. We have no information to suggest that any of those who were with the 3rd Infantry 2nd Brigade with Greg Kelly have been injured in any way. Heavy fire, absolutely. We heard it live. But injured or machinery taken out, no. Greg Kelly describing trucks coming at them with machine guns on the back on what Greg Kelly described as suicide missions. Certainly no way for a small half-ton pickup to withstand a Bradley fighting vehicle or one of the American tanks. It's just not going to happen. A number of things could happen now that our troops have entered Baghdad. Some of the decisions will be made by the generals. Some will be dictated by the enemy. So what if? Retired Marine Gunnery Sergeant and Gulf War veteran Bob Newman is live with us. He's on the satellite as we continue to watch the live pictures inside Baghdad. Gunny, thank you for allowing me to call you that. What do you make of the fact that some of our folks are inside Baghdad even now?
Standard operational procedure, Shep. I mean, frankly, last week when we had this little pause to refuel and get some sleep and get some more ammunition up front, I was frankly laughing at some of the generals and colonels on your so-called competitors on like MSNBC and CBS saying, oh, this must be some kind of a disaster. That is standard operational procedure, as is this armed reconnaissance probe into Baghdad right now.
Yeah, probe is how our experts were describing it earlier in the day, saying that when the military, the coalition forces see an opportunity of any kind, opportunities laid out in advance, the kind of things that they want to hit, they'll take it. And then if the enemy presents them something and their recon tells them that it's available, they'll go after that as well. There is some degree of surprise right here that it was able to happen this quickly. You?
It doesn't really surprise me very much. You've got the 3rd Infantry Division, which is highly capable and illustrious combat unit. You've got the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force and the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Brigade coming up on the east, and they are looking for a fight. One thing we have got to understand, that every American has got to understand, we don't sit back and wait for the enemy to come to us. We go to them. We are the most superior armed force on the face of the planet with superior leaders, superior weapons, and superior tactics. Anyone who wants to come out and fight in the back of a pickup truck is welcome to. You mess with the best, you die like the rest.
We're working to get Greg Kelly back up. We have no reason. I'm also getting flooded with emails from people asking whether something happened to Greg Kelly, and it's our belief that it hasn't, that in the middle of all the chaos there, he just wasn't able to report at the time. Gunny, let's say you're sitting outside Baghdad and you're running this war about now. Talk about the kinds of targets that you'd like to hit if you see an opportunity to probe.
Any target with a weapon or which might have a weapon, whether it's a pickup truck, a T-72, now that's a high-value target right there, or something like a ZSU 23 TAC-4. That is something that is always of interest. It's a 4-barreled, radar-driven 23-millimeter Gatling gun, really, or I'm sorry, not Gatling gun, but automatic weapon. And it's a quad barrel, and it can literally rip an aircraft out of the sky. You see something like that, you really go after it. And of course, we're looking down at the battlefield all the time with things like the Predator unmanned aerial vehicle and the Global Hawk unmanned aerial vehicle. And keep in mind, the Predator carries a Hellfire missile when it wants to be so armed. And that's why I don't really think that Saddam Hussein was out there today wandering around in the street having a little party, because all it takes is one Predator to get a look at him, and he'll have a Hellfire missile ruining his day rather quickly.
Predator or a Global Hawk. You mentioned the Global Hawk, and it's being used for the first time widespread in combat, and was doing some research. If you're one of those who likes to go onto the internet, check out the Global Hawk online. All you have to do is a Yahoo or Google search for Global Hawk, and it will tell you about this incredible piece of machinery and all that it is allowing us to do right now. Gunny, it truly is astounding.
Oh, it is, and this is just technology that is made all the more powerful by the leader on the ground. And as we've seen from Kosovo to all the way from Vietnam all the way up through Kosovo into Beirut, it is the Marine and the soldier on the ground with a rifle that makes the difference. And when you back them up with things like the M1 Abrams tank, the Bradley fighting vehicle, light armored vehicles, the LAV-25, or the Hammerhead from the Marines, there's nothing that can stand up to us. Certainly not a bunch of ragtag idiots like these Iraqis. And they're dying like idiots too. They have no comprehension of battlefield tactics.
Well, sustained high altitude surveillance and recon, and that's what the Global Hawk brings us. You know, Gunny,
apparently fearful of the fighting around the capital, that Iraqi officials promised to be a fierce attack on coalition forces.
We will do something to them that will be a great example for those mercenaries.
As coalition forces consolidated their grip on the now renamed Baghdad International Airport, sources in Baghdad told CNN Republican Guard and Fedayeen forces were being called to new front lines near the massive airfield. Nick Robertson, CNN, on the Jordan-Iraq border.
The story of Saddam Hussein for the day. We'll talk to one of the principal spokesmen for CENTCOM in Qatar. Need to take a break first, and our coverage continues.
Like the SSOs, the Special Security Organization, are something that our Special Operations Forces, whether they be SEALs or Green Berets or Force Recon Marines, whatever they happen to be, are in particularly looking for. I mean, that's another high-value target. It's an unfortunate fact of war that we're having to deal with a man like Saddam Hussein with a regime of frankly, card-carrying murderers. He's got the Fedayeen Saddam. They have extensive criminal records, and we've seen that they can be quite effective on the battlefield. And we must always keep in mind that once we occupy the city, and it's not going to be much longer now, I don't think, we're going to have a terrorist and guerrilla war on our hands, but we are experts at fighting such wars. We know how to handle this. This isn't our debut at this sort of thing.
Gunny, we got to hit a quick commercial break. We'll come right back on the other side. We're hoping to get in contact with our correspondent, Rick Leventhal, who we believe has been getting some shut-eye, but we hope will be able to make contact with us. Also, there is breaking news now on Fox News Channel. Our correspondent, Greg Kelly, who is embedded with the 2nd Brigade of the 3rd Infantry Division, is inside Baghdad right now, and there is a fierce firefight underway. We were listening to him live a short time ago. The moment the technology allows, we will take you back there live. It's good to have you with us on this Saturday morning on the East Coast, this Friday night in prime time on the West Coast. Thanks for trusting us for your news and information. We're back in 1 minute.
You know, we're just going to have to wait and watch the play developed.
Just so long as it does not wind up being Stalingrad. General Monty Meggs mapping it out for us tonight. We appreciate it as always, sir. Pleasure to talk to you.
You bet.
By now, of course, you have heard the story. American forces in Iraq learned that Private First Class Jessica Lynch was alive and not at all well in a Nasiriyah hospital, because while visiting there, the husband of a nurse at that hospital heard Private Lynch being beaten at incredible risk to himself, representing humanity in its highest form. This man went to the first U.S. soldier he could find. Without him, U.S. Special Ops might not have found Private Lynch in time. All we know of him, his name is Mohammed. Peter Baker is the Washington Post reporter who found Mohammed.
He went to a hospital where Jessica Lynch was being held because his wife worked there as a nurse. He noticed a whole lot of security around and got curious, started asking around, and was told there was an American soldier being held.
You bet. I think it's certainly a psychological effect where, you know, the regime leaders have continued to lose control, and now they see tanks in their streets and these types of visuals, and then they see people in the military handing out food and water. That's a very big, deep, and not so good psychological impact for the regime.
All the reporting that we've had over the last 24 hours is while the Iraqi forces may not be, and clearly are not, as technologically advanced, that they may not be as effective of fighters, there still seems to be in place a command and control function. Do you disagree with that?
You know, I disagree with that. I'll make a couple of points. First off, I know we all saw the tapes last night, our time, I think by midday your time, of Saddam Hussein. What I'll say to your viewers is that no one in Iraq's seeing those because their communications have been so degraded. We're seeing in many cases, Aaron, in fact in a lot of cases, if not all cases, they're now having to transmit messages by courier, just like the days of the Civil War. And so the regime's communications have been degraded. They've been forced to use other communications channels that I really can't go into now. But we still have yet to see this military force make a coherent move, and we're watching them very closely. I do want to point out that there are still a lot of bad things that can happen. He could still use weapons of mass destruction against our troops.